Today's daf is Menachos daf Samach Tes, and we are at the Mishnah at the seventh wide line of daf Samach Ches Amid Beis. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Chava Miriam Bas Malka Freda, Shlomo ben Chayaleah, Baruch Yitzchak ben Shifra Mirol, and Rachel Bas Hen. So we're moving along in the sixth Perek of Mesechus Menachos, Perek Rabbi Yishmael. We're discussing halachos related to the Karban Omer. Additionally, as we've seen in an incredible way, almost everything that we've been learning is davar be'itay matov, shloishim yom chaydem l'chag, so many different sugyas related to chametz and matzah, Karban Pesach, Karban Omer. We'll see in today's daf an incredible shout out to the Loimdei Daf Yomi, a little wink in terms of how the zmanim are aligning. Regardless, another daf that talks very much about the Karban Omer. So the Karban Omer, like all karbanos, had a purpose. The purpose of the Karban Omer was to be mater the Tfuah HaChadasha. It was brought on Tezai and Nisan. Up until Tezai and Nisan, anything that was quote-unquote Chadash was Asur B'Achila. You're not allowed to eat Chadash, just like you're not allowed to eat Nevela, just like you're not allowed to eat Basar V'Chalav. What about Bizman Hazeh? So that's the raid bite from Masechtas Kedushin that we attached to the previous daf. There was a part 2 to that raid that Be'ezer Hashem will attach either to today's daf or I think to tomorrow's daf. But regardless, the Karban Omer, in addition to being a Karban, it was a matter. The truth is, there was another Karban that was brought in the Beis HaMikdash that was also matter the Tfuah HaChadasha. That Karban was the Shtei HaLechem. The Shtei HaLechem was matter just like the Karban Omer was matter. Now, Kana ben Shoyal, I don't understand. You need 2 karbanos to be mater? Not just that, the 2 karbanos were brought 7 weeks apart. So if the Karban Omer was already mater, what's the Shtei HaLechem being mater? Our Mishnah is going to address that question. Thus, without further ado, Zaktelige Mishnah, Ha'Imer Ha'yamata b'Medina. The Karban Omer was mater the Tfuah HaChadasha b'Medina, meaning outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Shtei HaLechem b'Mikdash, and the Shtei HaLechem was mater the Tfuah HaChadasha in the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, as much as the Karban Omer was mater, it was only mater that if you want to eat Chadash now at your Shabbos table, that's okay. But to take Chadash and bring it as a Karban, that was not okay. You can't take the Chadash and make it part of your Mincha, part of your Shtei HaLechem, part of the Lechem Apanim, part of your Lachmei Toida. That was something that was not okay. It was the Shtei HaLechem that was mater Chadash in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Mishnah Emevian, Menachos ubikurim uminchas behema koidem la'omer. You're not allowed to bring mincha from Chadash, Bikurim from Chadash, and the Minchas Behema, which is the Minchas Nesachim from Chadash, before the Karban Omer was brought. Because again, the Karban Omer is Mata Chadash, Imhevi, and let's say one did bring Pasal, the Karban's going to be Pasal. You're also not allowed to bring Chadash Koidim L'Shtei HaLechem. In other words, even then, Lo Yavi, as the Mishnah just said, Shtei HaLechem was Mata B'Mikdash. However, in Hevi Kasher, in the event that one violated this and he did it, B'di'evet, it's going to be Kasher. So the Shtei HaLechem is what was first Mater Chadash B'Mikdash, stating that there's an afkamina between the Omer being mater the Chadash, even as it relates to Mikdash, versus the Shtei HaLechem being mater Chadash b'Mikdash. In the event that one brought Chadash in the Mikdash, Koidem la'Omer, it's going to be possible. If one brought Chadash in the Mikdash, noch the Omer, aber Koidem the Shtei HaLechem, even though you're not allowed to, because it's only the Shtei HaLechem that's matter, but b'di'evet, it's going to be Kasha Zok to Gemara. Yosef Rab Tarfon was sitting for Kashalei, and he was very bewildered. He was bothered. Ma being Koidem la'Omer, l'Koidem Shtei HaLechem. What's the difference between Chadash that was brought Koidem la'Omer, where the halach is that in the Beis HaMikdash it's going to be Pasal, versus Chadash that was brought Koidem koidim l'shtei halechem, where the halacha is in the Beis HaMikdash, it's going to be kosher. Meaning, if the shtei halechem is what's matter, the chadash and the mikdash, then if you brought it before the shtei halechem, it should be pasul. Just like if you brought it before the omer, it's pasul. So Reb Tarfon wasn't sure about this. Amar l'fanav Yehuda bar Nechemya. So there was a yid, his name is Yehuda bar Nechemya. He was in the presence of Reb Tarfon when Reb Tarfon was asking this question. And he turns to Reb Tarfon, he says, I know the chiluk, lo yimamar kodim la'omer. Could be, before the omer, it's more chamer, and the reason is it came because before the carbon omer is brought, not only is chadash aser in the mikdash, but it's also lehedyet as well. Being that it's also lehedyet, so it comes out, there's no tzad heter. As a result, this is very severe. Could you compare that to kodim l'shtei halechem, shehuter michlalo yetzel hedyet, where you find that Eitzel Hedyet, at that point it's already mutter, because the carbon omer was matter, the chadash lehedyet. Meaning, could be the reason after the omer, before the shtei halechem, even though you didn't bring the shtei halechem yet, which is matter chadash b'mikdash, the halach is it's not so chamer, so that b'di'evet the carbon is going to be kosher, is because this chadash right now is al kolponim mutter lehedyet. Being that it's huta michlalo, is such a svara that you find in many sugis hashas, so that's why we treat it a little bit more kuladik, even when it comes to the mikdash, as opposed to kodim al-aymer, where there's no huta michlalo at all. Therefore, even klapi the mikdash, it's going to be more chamer, it's going to be pasul. Either way, this was Yehuda bar Nechemya's ha'ara. Shastik Reb Tarfon. Reb Tarfon heard that, he was quiet. Meaning, Reb Tarfon walked into Beis Medrash, he has this gross akasha, and Yehuda bar Nechemya seemingly stumped Reb Tarfon. And when Reb Tarfon was quiet, Savu Panav Shal Yehuda bar Nechemya, Yehuda bar Nechemya's face began to glow a little bit. Meaning, he had a little smile that was creeping into the sides of his face. Rabbi Akiva was a Talmud of Reb Tarfon. He said, Yehuda, Savu Panecha Sheishafta Zaken. Are you very proud of yourself because you were able to stump the Zaken? Timahani would be a chiddush to me in Tarach Yomim if you would have Arichas Yomim. Rabbi Loi. It's Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, who was a Talmud Rabbi Akiva. He said, let me tell you the postscript to this story. He said, Oisa Perek, and you can't even make this up, Pras HaPesach was 2 weeks before Pesach. In the world of Hashgacha, 2 weeks before Pesach, like to the minute. Does it say 7:29? It's incredible. But either way, Oisai HaPerek Pras HaPesach. That's when this story took place. He says, when I came back to Eretz Yisrael, Shavuos time, Sha'alti Acharov, I noticed that I couldn't find Yehuda bar Nechemya. So I started asking, Yehuda bar Nechemya, Heichanu, do you know where he is? And they told me, Niftar v'halach loi. He left this world, and he said that it was for sure because Rabbi Akiva uttered the words Timihani im Tarach Yomim, and it was for sure because of the fact that Yehuda ben Nechemya's face glowed a little bit. He had this smirk over the fact that he was able to stump Reb Tarfon. We're going to get back to this in a minute, but just a postscript, a halachic postscript to this discussion. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Now Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said the different Yehuda ben Nechemya, so it's interesting. As much as Yehuda ben Nechemya goes down in infamy because of this shtickle Torah that he said, and the way he reacted to it, Abulamaisi said good. Ad kedei kach, that the Amoraim, they reckoned with what he said. The great Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said that according to what to Yehuda bar Nechemya's Taina, which was what? That the reason that Chadash Koidem La'omer is pasul in the mikdash is because it's loy hutem b'chlalai, as opposed to Chadash Koidem L'shtei Halechem. Although the Chatchila is not okay, but the Eved is Kasha b'mikdash because it's Hutta b'chlali b'medina. According to that methodology, so the following should emerge: Nesachim bikurim she'ekrivim koydem la'omer. That in the event there was Nesachim, that was Yayin, that was brought from bikurim koydem la'omer before the carbon omer ksherim, they're going to be Kasha. Meaning, Nesachim bikurim she'ekrivam, even koidim la'omer, are going to be kosher. What's the svara? The svara is because Nesachim, the yayin, doesn't require any heter in the from the Carbon Omer perspective, because Nesachim is never Asr Lahedit, and being that the Nesachim is never Asr Lahedit, so Kumtais, it's Mutter Lahedit even Koidem La'omer. If it's Mutter Lahedit even Koidem La'omer, so now if you're going to bring it in the Beis HaMikdash, it's going to be Mutter as well. Meaning, why is it that Chadash after the Omer Koidem L'shtei Alechem is Kasha B'di'evet? Because it's Mutter Lahedit. So the Nesachim Bikurim even Koidem La'omer is Mutter Lahedit. It's for that reason they're going to be Kasha. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that so obvious? So the Gemara says, no, it's not so obvious. I'll tell you why. Because Ma'od Tema would have thought Hassam, the whole Svar of Yehuda Bar Nechemya is Dafke there. The Hutim Mechlali where be'etzem the chadash should be aser. It became mutter al yedei the carbon omer, so that there's a chalois heter right now on the chadash. So being that there's a chalois heter, we say the svara of the chalois heter makes it huta b'chlaloi eitzel mikdash. Aval hacha over here when it comes to the nesachim, the loy huta b'chlaloi, where it was never huta b'chlaloi, and the reason is because there's no iser b'chlal that you need to be matter. So I would have thought loy. I would have thought that's not considered huta b'chlaloi. Meaning there's makom to say the huta b'chlaloi is where something is bechefza shaykh to iser. Now we were matter it, so it has the kula of huta mechlala. But something that's not shaykh to iser at all, it's not in the sugi of chadash. So maybe even though it's mutter, but it's not considered huta mechlala. Kamash malon. That's what Nachman Yitzchak wanted to teach us that no, and in fact it's just the opposite. Kol shkein achat lo yitzchak klal. That this is even more of a reason that it should be mutter. Meaning I hear the ma'u the tema. That's why Rav Nachman Yitzchak is addressing this point. There could have been makom to say that huta mechlala is a ma'ila klapi desvara. Kamash malon. No, it's actually just the opposite. Huta mechlali, if anything, would be a chesaron. The fact that it was like itzer cloud, that it was never even aser, that's the ma'ila. The bottom line is that the Mishnah said you're not allowed to bring from the tfuah chadasha a carbon even after the carbon omer was brought, before the shtei halechem was brought, stating that if you bring it after the Omer was brought, but before the Shtei Alechem was brought, but the evidence going to be kosher. If you would bring it even before the carbon Omer was brought, then it would be possible. So usually we think of the Omer talking to Chadash as it relates to Gvulin, and the Shtei Alechem is talking to Chadash as it relates to the Mikdash. But you see from our Mishnah that there's an afkamina in the Mikdash Gufa as it relates to the carbon Omer. Because before the carbon Omer was brought, Chadash in the Beis HaMikdash would be possible. Once the carbon Omer was brought, at that point Chadash in the Beis HaMikdash, Ever would be kosher. What allows you to bring the lechatchila mamish? That would bring the shtei alechem. What's the chilek? What's the difference between chadash before the omer in the Beis Hamikdash versus chadash before the shtei alechem in the Beis Hamikdash? At the end of the day, you need to bring the shtei alechem. So if you need to bring the shtei alechem, and that's what's matter. So l'chura, you would say that it should either always be kosher or always be pasul. Why is there a chilek between bringing the chadash thar the carbon omer versus noch the carbon omer? That was Reb Tarfon's kasha, and Yehuda Bar Nechemya infamously responded by saying that before the carbon omer was brought, it's loyhuta mechlala eitzel hedyet. Hence, we treat it more stringently in the Beis Hamikdash. We say, but the evidence is going to be possible. Once the carbon omer is brought, it's already huta mechlala. Once it's huta mechlala, that's always a svara to be mekel. And in this sugya, we're going to be mekel as well. And then the Gemara went and told a fascinating anecdote related to Yehuda Bar Nechemya, that when Yehuda Bar Nechemya quote unquote stumped Reb Tarfon was quiet. Yehuda Bar Nechemya was savu panav. Rabbi Akiva didn't like it, and Rabbi Akiva told him it would be a chiddush to me im tarich yamim if you're going to have a arichas yamim. And then Rabbi Yehuda Bar Abdilai, who's the famous Rabbi Yehuda, who's a Tam Rabbi Akiva, who was an eyewitness to these events, he says, I want you to know the story took place exactly 2 weeks before Pesach, and I guess all the Chachamim were in Eretz Yisrael, and they were tzazamin, they were being Oile Regel. He said, I came back to Eretz Yisrael Shavuos time. That's the next time you have a mitzvah to be in Eretz Yisrael, to be Oile Regel. He said, I was looking for Yehuda Bar Nechemya. I couldn't find him. And they told me that he had died. And it was clearly because of the words that came out of Rabbi Akiva. Just one ha'ara before we go weiter. And that is, I saw a Brufa Margolis in a Sefer Netzut Sayar. So he makes a beautiful observation. He said, when did Yehuda Bar Nechemya die? It sounds like he died sometime after Pesach. and sometime before Shavuos, right? This might say happened right before Pesach. It sounds like Rabbi Yehuda was in Eretz Yisrael for Pesach, came back for Shavuos, and he found out that Yehuda bar Nechemia wasn't alive anymore. He died bein difchala atzarta. So he says, take a look at the Gemara, Yimesachtes Yevamis, Daf Samach Aleph on the base. The Gemara that everybody knows. The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 Talmidim. The Kulon Mesu beperek echad. They all died during the same tkufa. And what was the tkufa that they died? It was between Pesach and Shavuos. And why did they die between Pesach and Shavuos? Shloinagu kovid zelazeh. Because they were mevazah Talmidei Chachamim. Says Rav Ruven Margolis is a precedent from the great Talmidei Rabbi Akiva that they died because they were loinagu kovid zelazeh. And when did they die? During this tkufa. He says this Yehuda bar Nechemia literally had the misa of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. He was mevazah Talmud Chacham on some level, Reb Tarfin, and he died mamish during the Zelbut Kufa. And by the way, who is the one that said to Miani would be a chiddush if you're going to make it out alive? It was Rabbi Akiva who had experience with this. But the bottom line is, he died misas Talmid Rabbi Akiva ba'oisa perik mamish, and he lakes su does Rabbi Ruven Margolis that we know the Gemara says in Masechtes Shabbos Daf Kuf Men Zayin Amud Beis that Shmuel the doctor said all the different in Yonei Refuah work best between Pesach and Shavuos. That's the time that they're the most effective. We've mentioned many times over the years that the Hilgach Sam Sofer, in Chedushich Sam Sofer al Hashas, and that Gemara says this is the Makar, the Chodesh Iyar, being the Chodesh HaMasugal Refuah, Iyar is Rosh Tevis, Ani Havayu Roifecha. He said it comes from this Gemara. It's the one complete month between Pesach and Shavuos. So it says Ruven Margolis that if you think about it, it's Hepech Asfara, right? This is a Kufa, it says man of Refuah. So what's going on over here? And the truth is the Marsha already makes this observation. The Marsha in the Gemara Yavamis that says that Talmid Rabbi Akiva all died by Isa Perek. The Gemara says they died because of a machla, because of Misas Askara. Says the Marsha, take a look at the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Mem Zayin. This is this man that's supposed to be Mesugal Refuah, and Afilu Hachi, they died. And this is a chiddush that despite the fact that it says man of Refuah, they died. But says Rabbi Margolis, what's the oimik? What's takapshat? Why are all these people dying during this tkufa? He says, because the Gemara says, Kol Mavaza Talmud Chacham, Ein refuah lemakasai. And he says, Kubi, that's exactly the point of Chazal. That during this tkufa, which is a tkufa where people are supposed to have refuahs and yeshuas, afilu hachi kula mesu ba'isa perek. Why? Because they were mevazah Talmidei Chachamim. Because kol mevazah Talmud Chacham ein refuah lemakasai. It's all connected. This is the cheshbon. Either way, a very, very light anecdote tucked away here in Menachos Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis. We now return to our regular program, which is the halachas of the Karban Omer, of the Shtei Alechem, and we're going to see from where we're up to now until the daf ends, or at least until where our daf ends, which is in the middle of Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis. The Gemara is going to fire away with a whole bunch of different ibayas related to the sugya de jour. Says the Gemara, Seder. That's interesting. You have the word Seder in parentheses, right? What's your siman? Your siman is the Seder. That's not bad. Seder, Hanotza, Gali, Pil, Siman. Says the Gemara, Bayi, Rami Bar Chama. So here's the first Bayi. Rami Bar Chama had the following question. Shtei Alechem Al Shiatu Shloi Kesidron. Could the Shtei Alechem be matter? Shloi Keseder. So ordinarily the Karban Omer was matter and the Shtei Alechem was matter, right? As it relates to the Tfuah HaChadasha being mutter in the Beis HaMikdash, it required these two matirim. Like two zrikas, it required two matirim. It required the Karban Omer, and it required the Shtei Halechem. The traditional Seder would be on Tez Zayin Nisan, you bring the Karban Omer, and then you count 49 days, and on the 50th day, on Shavuos, you go and you bring the Shtei Halechem. The question is, what would be if first the Shtei Halechem was brought, and then the Karban Omer was brought? It was brought Shaloi Keseder. Would it be mutter, or would it not be mutter? Now, to be clear, on the tzad that it would be mutter shloi keseder, the cheshbon would be, you would bring the shtei halechem. It can't be matter because the shtei halechem also needs the Karban Omer, right? The shtei halechem is standing on the plates of the Karban Omer. But the shtei halechem would be matter for when you bring the Karban Omer. So you're going to have to wait almost a full year. And then when you bring the Karban Omer, the next year, Tez Zayin Nisan, you won't have to wait until the next shtei halechem will say that, I had the shtei halechem, I had the Karban Omer, albeit shloi keseder, memela, it's going to be okay. This was Rami Bar Chama's shaila. Now, again, also to be clear, as it relates to the Gvulin, there's no shaila, because for the Gvulin, all you need is the Karban Omer. The Shtei Halechem is not Mata B'Gvulin, it's the Omer that's Mata B'Gvulin, and it's only the Omer that's Mata B'Gvulin. The shaila is, as it relates to Tfuah Chadash in the Beis HaMikdash, that has two Matirim, because the Omer and the Shtei HaLechem both need to be brought in order for it to be mutter. Usually the Seder is Omer Shtei HaLechem. What would be if it happened in the reverse order? Now the Gemara says, hey Chidami, what's the case? I mean, the case is you didn't bring the carbon Omer. Like, what exactly is the case? The Gemara says, no, I'll tell you a very simple case. What would be if you planted between the carbon Omer and the Shtei HaLechem? And then you went ahead and you brought the Shtei HaLechem. And then the subsequent year, you brought the carbon Omer. Do we say it has to be in order, otherwise it's not going to be okay? No, so you'll have to wait for the following Shtei HaLechem in order for it to be mutter the Beis HaMikdash. Or maybe it's going to be mutter Shaloi Kisidron as well. So what's the case? The case is where somebody planted in between the carbon Omer and the Shtei HaLechem. So we need to know this because it's going to come up a few times in the daf. And that is the carbon Omer was only matter tfuah that had been planted, or even more than that, it had what's referred to as hashrasha. It was already rooted in the ground before the carbon Omer was brought. But the carbon Omer is not going to be matter something that was planted after the carbon Omer was brought, right? You're a day late and $1 short. And even if you planted it before the Omer was brought, if it didn't have hashrasha until after the Omer was brought, it wouldn't work either. So the case is where the Tfuah HaChadasha was planted nach the carbon Omer, which means for sure the Hashrasha happened nach the carbon Omer, which means that the carbon Omer by definition has no ability to be matered. But the planting of it and the Hashrasha of it happened before the Shtei HaLechem, which means the Shtei HaLechem, it's already in its quote-unquote fiscal year, has the ability to be matter. So the shaila is, the next year when you're going to bring the carbon Omer, do we say I have the Shtei HaLechem, the carbon Omer, or no, being that it was not Shaloi Seder, it's not going to be okay. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba said, Tashma, I'll bring you a raya. So the raya is going to be from a long brisa. We're going to need the last part of the brisa. The pasuk says, V'im takriv minchas bikurim. So this pasuk is talking about a mincha that's a minchas bikurim. So what's this mincha? So the brayse of minchas omer kasam medaber. It's referring to the minchas omer. That's bikurim. It's chadash, right? Before the carbon Omer was brought, there's no chadash being eaten b'chlal. So this is called a minchas bikurim. Meichambal. What was it brought from? Menachos. It was brought from barley. You'd say it was brought from barley. Maybe it was brought from wheat. All the menachos kemat were brought from chitim. So why would you assume that this one's different? It's brought from sa'irin. So the Brisa says, Rabbi Eliezer says, I'll tell you how I know. Nemar aviv b'mitzrayim. Again, there's no shortage of remazim to the fact we're doing the right thing right now. It says the word aviv b'mitzrayim. This pasuk is actually tucked away. It's in the end of Parshas Miketz. V'hapishta v'asa'ira this is discussing the aftermath of Makas Barad. But either way, it says the word Aviv, and it says the word Aviv in the context of Sa'ir, as we just saw. And it says the word Aviv L'Dairis. It says in this pasuk, when Takriv Minchas Bikurim Lashem Aviv. Ma Aviv Aviv Mitzrayim. Just like that Aviv that we just mentioned was Sa'ir, and Aviv L'Dairis Sa'ir. So Rabbi Eliezer said, based on Exeir Shava, Aviv, that's how I know it's Sa'ir. Rabbi Kiva says, Matzinu Yochid Shemev we find that a Yochid brings karbanis from chitim v'chavas v'nasayrin, and sometimes there's a concept of a Yochid bring a minchas sayrin. V'tzibur, we find that tzibur shemevin chavas v'nachitin, they bring menachitin, and if that's the case, it's mistaber that mevin chavas v'nasayrin. There must be some carbon tzibur that's brought menasayrin. I mean, just like you find the Yochid brings menachitim v'nasayrin, so it's mistaber zok Rabbi Akiva that the tzibur also brings menachitim v'nasayrin. Now, if atoyim ba menachitim, if the minchas sayrin is brought menachitim, and tzinu tzibur shemevin chavas v'nasayrin, based on process of elimination, this is the only option you have for a minchas tzibur to be brought menasayim. And if you're going to tell me that's brought menachit, then you don't have anything. Must be it's brought menasayim. No, Rabbi Akiva says, I'm backing into it. I don't have a shava like Rabbi Eliezer does. But at the same time, it must mean this is the way it is. And this is the pshat we need. Rabbi Akiva said, I have another mahalach. How I know that the minchas ha'omer was brought menasayim. Because if you can tell me the was brought menachitin, ain't shtei alechem bikurim. It's going to come out the shtei alechem is not bikurim. What does that mean? When the Torah talks about the Shtei Alechem, so the pasuk says, "Uviyoyim abikurim ba'krivchem mincha chadasha l'Hashem." So the day of Shavuos is referred to as the Yom HaBikurim. Why is it referred to as the Yom HaBikurim? Bikurim is miloshem bechar, right? The bikurim is the first fruit. It's the first day that you're bringing what? Zok Torah mincha chadasha. In other words, the Torah describes the Korban Omer as a Minchas Bikurim. The Torah describes the Shtei Halechem as a Minchas Bikurim. Which means they both have to be the first. The Omer has to be the first, and the Shtei Halechem has to be the first. Zok Rabbi Akiva, how's that possible? L'chayra, if the Minchas HaOmer is brought from Chitin, and the Shtei Halechem are brought from Chitin, so the Shtei Halechem is not going to be the first anymore, because the Minchas HaOmer was already brought from the new Chitin. Kumtois, that the Shtei Halechem is close, it's close, but it's second, it's not first. How then could the Torah refer to it as Bikurim? How could the Torah refer to it as a Mincha Chadasha? Says Rabbi Akiva, again, I'm backing into it. Must be that the Minchas HaOmer was brought from Sa'irin, and the Shtei Halechem was brought from Chitin, and as a result, they're both Bikurim. Das is Bikurim for the Sa'irin, and das is Bikurim for the Chitin, as I said Rabbi Akiva. Either way, so in this Bryce, we have three different Mahalchim, how we know the Minchas HaOmer was Ba Minha Sa'irin. Rabbi Eliezer said, I have a positive Makar. Gzeir Shava. Aviv b'Mitzrayim, by Makas Barad, and Aviv regarding the Korban Omer. And just like the Aviv over there was referring to Sa'irim, this is referring to Sa'irim as well. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't have a positive Makar, but I have two ways of backing into it. One mahalach of backing into it is, I know there has to be a Korban Tzibur of a Mincha of Sa'irim, and the only thing I have available right now to be able to fit that bill would be the Korban Omer. Additionally, I know that the Omer and the Shtei Halechem are both referred to as Bikurim, and if they're brought from the same min, it's only the Omer that would be the Bikurim, as opposed to the Shtei Halechem will not be the Bikurim. Must be one was brought from Sa'irin, hence it's the Bikurim for the Sa'irim, and the other one's brought from Chitin, hence it's considered the Bikurim for the Chitin. Tain is the Gemara. As it relates to Rabbi Akiva's Davar Achar, the third mahalach in this brayz of how we know the Minchas HaOmer was brought Minas Sa'irin. I don't understand. Because if you're going to tell me the Shtei Halechem Shaloi Kesidron Sharian, if you're going to tell me that the Shtei Halechem could be brought even Shaloi Kesidron Mishkachas Lo, I have a hechatimtza that the Korban Omer could be considered the Bikurim, and the Shtei Halechem could be considered the Bikurim. They're both brought Minachitin, and there's no issue. How's that possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. The Makriv Omer, Mahanach da Ashrish, Koidim L'Shtei Halechem, Ubasar da Omer de Ishtak. The case would be where a person went ahead and he planted after the Korban Omer was brought and before the Shtei Halechem was brought, which was the case of where the Shtei Halechem is being brought before the Korban Omer was brought. Because in that case, the Korban Omer didn't work for it because Tashrasha happened not the Korban Omer, and the Shtei Halechem did work for it because Tashrasha happened before the Shtei Halechem. Unless you'll tell me the Shtei Halechem doesn't work, unless the Korban Omer was brought first. But the case, Al Kapanim, is where somebody went ahead and he planted between the Korban Omer and the Shtei Halechem. Now, the Korban Omer that was brought that previous year didn't work. So the next year when he brought the Korban Omer needs to be matter that for, and he went ahead and he brought the Korban Omer from that for. Isn't that last year's? It's last year's, maybe Klapi the Shtei Halechem. On the side the Shtei Halechem works, which is what we're trying to figure out. But Klapi the Korban Omer, for sure it doesn't work. So again, he brought the Korban Omer from that for that had Hashrosha far the Shtei Halechem and not the Korban Omer. Okay, now when it came time to bring the Shtei Halechem, he brought the Shtei Halechem mehanuch the Ashrish koidem la'omer. This person went and he planted a second time. He planted after the Shtei Halechem had already been brought the previous year, which means that tfuah was not mutter even by the Shtei Halechem that had been brought. So that this person, if you think about it, he planted twice. He planted between the Korban Omer and the Shtei Halechem, and then he planted again noch the Shtei Halechem. But as it relates to the Korbanos that he brought the Korban Omer from what he had planted between the previous Omer and the Shtei Halechem, and he brought the Shtei Halechem from the Tfuah that he had planted after he had brought the previous Shtei Halechem. What's the Nakuda? He couldn't bring the shtei halechem from the tfuah that was brought after from the tfuah that he planted after the previous carbon omer and before the previous shtei halechem, because that the shtei halechem that he had brought previously was already matter. But at the same time, he was able to bring the carbon omer from that tfuah, and the reason he was able to bring the carbon omer from that tfuah is because the carbon omer had not been matter that. But here's the nekuda. The nekuda is, in this scenario, assuming this all works, you would have a situation where sai the carbon omer could be considered the mincha chadasha, and sai the shtei halechem could be considered the mincha chadasha. They could each be considered the mincha chadasha, right? Go from the beginning. The shtei halechem that was brought between the carbon that was brought from the tfuah that was planted between the carbon omer and the shtei halechem from that first planting. At that point, it was the mincha chadasha, right? Why was it the mincha chadasha? Because the carbon omer had not been matrit, so that's considered new tfuah. As opposed to when you go ahead and you plant again, and then you bring from the carbon omer, well, that carbon omer is also being brought from the chadasha, because even though you had brought already a shtei halechem, but the shtei halechem didn't work for what you planted afterwards. So you have a situation where say the shtei halechem is considered a mincha chadasha. I have a situation where the carbon omer is also considered mincha chadasha. Now, to be clear, the situation that we have right now is the shtei halechem is the mincha chadasha in the previous year's cheshbon. The Minchas ha'omer is considered the Tfuah Chadasha in this year's Cheshbon, but Rashi goes right there, and Rashi says that when you're going to go ahead and you're going to bring even the Shtei Halechem this year, meaning you're going to bring that second Shtei Halechem, that second Shtei Halechem is also going to be considered Chadash. It's going to be considered B'Yom HaKippurim. It's going to be considered the Mincha Chadasha, and the reason is because being that it's being brought from a different crop, it's being brought from the crop that was planted after the previous Shtei Halechem, and it's the first carbon that's being brought from that crop, so that in and of itself also gives it an ability to be considered mincha chadasha. But the bottom line is if you hold it could be brought shaloi keseder, so there is a heichatimsa where everything can be brought menachitin, and everything is going to be considered the mincha chadasha. Everything is going to be considered the Yom HaKippurim. Yet Rabbi Akiva said that it's impossible that they're both brought menachitin, because they're both brought menachitin. Then how could the shtei halechem be considered bikurim? How could it be considered mincha chadasha? Zok the Gemara, Amar Rabba. From Rabbi Akiva, I think you could be poshet that the only time this works is if it's brought keseder. If it's brought shaloi keseder, it doesn't work. Being that it has to be brought keseder, so at the end of the day, you're always going to be bringing the shtei halechem from the same tfuah that you're bringing the carbon omer from. And if that's the case, you'll never have a heichatimsa that they can both be brought from the chita. But the Gemara says it's not muchas. Misabris bikurim lepeira. Ka'amrinan lemizbeach ka'amrinan v'ha'achal mizbeach miperi dahashasa. So if you look at Rashi a little bit sasam, what the Gemara's dichoy is, but the Gemara tain is when we say that the shtei halechem has to be the mincha chadasha, the fact that it's the first of its crop, that in and of itself is not enough to satisfy the definition of it being Yom HaKippurim mincha chadasha. It would have to be the first thing that went on the mizbeach during this year. It would have to be the first thing, the hashasa, that actually made it on the mizbeach. And being that you're always bringing the carbon omer together with the shtei halechem, even if they're going to be brought from different crops, but at the same time it's going to be considered chadash this year on the mizbeach. If they're being brought both menachitin, you're not going to be able to satisfy that. Must be once from the soil and once from the chitin, and that's what the raya was. Next, as it relates to the shtei halechem, hanotza sharya or chanata sharya. So we're not farmers, so we don't know exactly what hanotza and chanata are, but these are two very, very early stages in the maturation of tfuah. Hanotza being the earlier stage, and chanata being the later stage. So the question is, which stage of the development of the tfuah would have to have been reached in order for it to be considered this year's tfuah, so that when you bring the shtei lechem, it's going to be matter. Is it the chanatz or is it the chanat? This was the shayla. So the Gemara says, one second, my hanatz and my chanat. When we say hanatz and chanat, let's be a little bit more clear. Do we mean the hanatz of the peri and the chanat of the peri? Meaning you're looking at the actual pri, the actual tfuah, hashta hashrasha sharya hanatza v'chanata mibaya. We said earlier that what's the keveya when it comes to does it belong to this year or not this year regarding Chadash? It's totally in Hashrasha. Did it take root? Hashrasha is before the Hanatza and the Chanata. Hanatza, it's growing already. Hashrasha is Paja when it takes a root. Ella must be Hanatza, the Allah, the Chanata, the Allah. We mean the leaves. We mean a stage that's even before the Hashrasha. And that was the Shaila. Mi havi ka Hashrasha aloi. Do you say that once the Hanatz and the Chanata of the Alim already start developing, that's the equivalent of Hashrasha, and at that point it's considered Chadash, and the Shtei Alechem can be matter or not? Avada, the Hanatz and the Chanata of the Peri is already considered Chadash, because that's not the Hashrasha. The Hashrasha already took care of that job. The question is, what about the Hanatz and the Chanata of the Allah? And the Gemara says, take. Rav bar Rav Chanan had ni by a chitin shazarim bekarka. Chitin that somebody planted in the ground. Omer matiron, oy ein omer matiron. Is the omer matter? Is the omer not matter? So we're jumping from the shtei alechem back to the omer. So the carbon omer is matter chadash. The question is, if somebody took chitin and he planted in the ground, and right now you brought the carbon omer, the fact that you planted the chitin, is that enough for the omer to be matter, or is it not enough for the omer to be matter? Now we mentioned already twice this morning that at what stage do we say the omer is matter? What's a tolian? It's tolian. We said hashrasha. So what exactly is the shayla? That's the Gemara's kasha. If it's talking about whether it was Hashrasha Tanina, it's a Mishnah. If it's talking about there was no Hashrasha, it's also a Mishnah. The Tanan, what's this Mishnah? If the Tfuah had Hashrasha before the Omer was brought, Omer Matiron. And if it didn't have Hashrasha before the Omer was brought, Asurim, it's going to be also until the next Omer was brought. So what exactly is the shayla? The Ameiram, I'm not sure, Zriya. We know it's a Mefurish Mishnah. It's all Tali and Hashrasha. Gemara says, the case is talking about where this farmer went, he already harvested his crop. Vizarinu, and he put it back in the ground, before the Omer. And then when the Omer was brought, it was Chalaf alayu, it passed over it. Meaning, what happened was the Tfuah was in the ground while this took place. And the shaila is, Mahu linkute, could I now, after the carbon omer was brought, pull it out, umechal minayu, and eat from it? What's the tutzta? The command shadi bekadadami v'sharinu omer. Do we say that when it was in the ground, it's as if it was in a kad, it's as if it was in my pantry, and as a result the omer was matter? Or maybe it became bottled to the yara. Now, as the Gemara initially thought, Rav bar Rav Chanan Shaila was, you have a farmer, takes, chitin, takes a seed, he throws it into the ground, and the question is it considered this year's tfuah for the omer to be matter, or am I going to have to wait for the next? That's not a shayla. We know it's always telling Hashrasha. Case is something else. Cases where chitin grew this year, and I harvested it this year, and instead of taking the chitin and putting it in my house, I took the chitin, I dug a ditch, I put it in the ground, and it was in the ground when the carbon omer was brought. The chakira is the omer matter something that's in the ground, not something that's in the ground because it didn't grow yet. I grew it, I harvested it, I put it back in the ground. Do we say when it's in the ground, it's like it's in a kad, so why should it not be matter? It's for sure this year's tfuah. Not only was there hashrasha this year, I was berina yiktzeru this year already. Or do we say that being that it's in the ground, it's batalu l'gabeyara, and if it's batalu l'gabeyara, we look at it as a shtik karka. That was the shayla. Says the Gemara that really this question of Rabbi bar Rav Chanan has implications and ramifications of other sugya shas. In fact, on the same note, yesh la'noina, would these chitin be subject to the laws of Oina, or would they not be subject to the laws of Oina? So Gemara says, what's the case? Elim is the case talking about the Amalei Shadai Bashisa. You have a Meicher and a Loikeach, where the Meicher said that I am selling you the chitin that are in this ditch, and you want to know how much chitin is there? 6 kurin of chitin. It was only 5. And now the shaila is there Oina, or is there not Oina? Now, let's just speak to that for a second, even though the Gemara is going to a minute. But what would be the shayla? Even the shayla is, we know ein oina lekarkos, right? That's the shayla. So we want to know, is there oina because it's metaltlin, or do we say, being that it's in the ground, ein oina lekarkos? But the Gemara says this is a moot point, because Rava said, kol davar sheben midah v'sheben mishkol v'sheben minyan, anything that you can measure, anything you can weigh, anything you can count, then even if somebody rips somebody off 5%, which is right 1/20, it's considered mekach tois. It's going to be chayes. You have to say the case is talking about. This is again Oina 101. The Amale, where the Meicha tells the Lekeach Shadoy Baki the Bayila. I want to sell you what's inside this pit. How much is there? Whatever a normal person, a farmer, would usually put there, that's what I'm selling. He didn't put a number to it. So it's not a David Sheben Midah Sheben Mishkov Sheben Minyan. Either way, Vasasadi Adam came, and they said it's not true. This guy didn't deliver. Yesh I know. Is there I know why? Because we say the command Shadi Bekada Damya. We say that it's as if it's sitting in his house. It's metaltalin, right? It's chitin that you already were harvest. As a result, it's subject to the laws I know. Or maybe batul gabeyara. It's batul to the ground, and just like enoy karkois, there's going to be no enough for this as well. Another question: nishban aleim, nishban aleim. Let's say someone has a dispute with somebody, and right now, based on choshen mishpat, he should have to swear. Would there be a shvua on Toyin v'nitin regarding this tfuah or not? Again, same chakira. Do we say it's as if it's sitting in a kadu k'metaltli damu? We view it as metaltli and shban alem. There would be a chiyashvua. Or we say it's batal to the ground. Or k'mekarki dami ve'ein shban alem. So regarding all three shilas, which is really one teku. It is. Take. So what was the next shaila? Boy Rabba bar Avchanan chitin shezaram bekarka. Meaning, chitin that you harvested, put back into the ground, and was in the ground when the korban omer was brought. Was the omer matir, or was the omer not matir? Do we view it as being metalton, do we view it as being karka? Another ramification of this shaila is it subject to oina? Ain't another karkais. If it's karka, no. If not, yeah. Another question is, would there be a shvua? Ain't a shpan ala karkais. But if it's metalton, there would be a shvua. Regardless, as it relates to these three questions that are really one, the answer is Teku. Boy Rami Bar Chama, another shayla. Chitin shebegalale bakar, v'soirin shebegalale behema mal. So what would be if an animal had excrement, right, the golol, the dung of the animal, and they found chitin inside, or soirin inside? What's the halach? The Gemara says, what's the halach regarding what? Do you mean? So the Gemara is going to try to guess what Rabbi Bar Shayla might have been. Is it with regards to tumas oichlin? Meaning you want to know right now the chitin and the soirin that came out of the golol, is it tamei tumas oichlin or not? So the Gemara says, Tani, it's mefurish brayso. Rabbi Bar Chama doesn't have to declare this shayla. Everyone knows this brayso. Chitin sheberai bakar. In the event that there was chitin or sa'ir inside the behema, in the event that somebody had a machshav, he says, you know something, what am I going to eat? I'm not sure what the visual is, but we'll skip it. But he had a machshava to eat it. It doesn't give it a chshivas of eichlin. It's not going to be tamid tumas eichlin. Likton lachila. If he did a maisa, however, he didn't just think maybe this would, be good in my sandwich, but rather what he did was he was malakid it. He did a maisa. Then already tamid tumas eichlin. The bottom line is mafurish braysos. Remember, Chama can't be claiming the shaila. We know it depends. He did a maisa. He didn't do a maisa. Elul Menachos. Maybe the shaila was: could you take the chitin and sa'irin and include it in your next mincha? Says the Gemara, I don't have a brisa for this, but I don't need a brisa for this. I could do better. I have a pasuk for this. Pshita deloy hakriveo no lefechasecha yirtzecha yisa panecha. The kind of say, "No, where do you get this chitin? You have a havamina. This is going to work." So the Gemara says, "Like tzricha." The case must be then aktinu. The case is talking about where this farmer took the chitin and the sa'irin and he planted it again. And now from this new crop, which has an origin of this, he wants to go and he wants to bring a mincha. And the question is, could he or could he not? Now, we said immediately, isn't there an Indian of hakriveo lefechasecha? So the Gemara says, let's drill down a little bit more. Mishum de isuso is the reason we assumed earlier it was hakriveo. Is the reason this is not okay because it's just disgusting? Well, if that's the case, for kivin dezarinu azdal mi isusayu, right? Believe it or not, this is fertilizer. Once you plant it again, it's It's not the end of the world. And if that's the case, then maybe it'd be fine. It could be the reason this is considered very inferior is because once it goes through the digestive tract of the animal, it weakens a little bit. And as a result, it's not so potent, and therefore it's considered something you're not supposed to give the Eibishter. Well, if that's the case, even if you was a reyed again, it's still considered krusha. The bottom line is, like some of the previous shaylas, the Gemara says, take Rami Bar Chama, another shayla, pil shabola kfifa mitzris. What would be if a pill, an elephant, went and it swallowed a kfifa mitzris? It swallowed a wicker basket. And then it exited the body of the pill, derech beis hari, right? Through its, again, when it went to the bathroom. Mahu, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Bachama, it's a nice story. But, like, what's the shayla? Could you be more specific? So again, the Gemara has to do some guessing over here. Maybe the shayla was, where this pill, well, not this pill, this kfifa mitzris, by the way, mitzvahs, this is another shout out to Davar Be'itay Matay. With this, and the pill is Makas Arev, right? Again, everything. But this Kfifa mitzvahs had been tummy. And the shaila is that now that it went through, sort of, the system of the elephant, so maybe now it became tar. But the Gemara says that can't be Rami Bar Chama shaila. And you know why? Tanin of Adas is a Mishnah. If you have a keli that's tummy, the only way to make it not tummy is if you do a shinoi maisa. You could do a shinoi, but if it's not a shinoi maisa, no. This didn't have a shinoi maisa. Because it sounds like the kfifa mitzris, after it went through the system of the elephant, looks exactly the way it looked before it went through the system. Nothing changed. So there's no shinei maisa. So what would make it tar? So the Gemara says, "Leitzricha the balahus," and the case must have been something else. This pil shabala kfifa mitzris is not talking about where he took a complete kfifa mitzris that was tamei, went through the system, and Rabbi Bar Chama is clearing now whether it's going to maintain its tumah or maybe there's a tahira because the pill was somehow matayirit. The case must be the bala hutzen. The elephant swallowed hutzen, the wicker. It swallowed the material that was used to make the kfifa mitzris. Va'avdinu kfifa mitzris, and then the person that fashioned this kfifa mitzvahs did so from those hutzin. What's the shaila? The shaila is mi havi ikol. Do we say that when the hutzin went through the system of the pill, that it's considered that the hutzin were digested by the pill? If that's the case, we would then view now the hutzin as being part of the excrement of the pill, which would then make it kli glalim, and the halach is that kli glalim and kli adama ein mekablan tuma. The amamar kli avanim and kli glalim kli adama ein mekablan tuma. And if that's the case, so it would have no ability to become tummy. Or maybe it's not considered ikal. In other words, the shaila was a completely different shaila. The shaila was where the pill swallowed hutzin, and then it went and it excreted it. So the question is, if somebody would go now and make a keli out of it, would it be mekabel tumah or would it not be mekabel tumah? Hutzin is mekabel tumah. Kli glalim is not mekabel tumah. Do we say it's hutzin because it went in hutzin, it came out hutzin, or do we say it went in hutzin, it came out kli glalim? Mi havi ikol or lai havi ikol? Do we say that the hutzin are considered digested or not? We'll see from the Hemshech of the Gemara a better appreciation of the shaila. If a person eats food, for example, he digests the food, so the food's considered to have been properly digested. That's teva. But hutzin is not something people usually eat, right? Even elephants. So when the elephant eats the hutzin, it could be when it leaves the body, it doesn't get a din kli glalim. Kli glalim is something that the derech is to digest. Mi havi ikul, klapi the pill, and as a result it's regular kli glalim that's not makabel tuma, or not, says the Gemara. For this we're not saying teku so fast. We might have a little bit of a pshitos. I think you pledge for something Ula said, Mishum Rab Shimon ben Yair Tzadik. I said it was a story, Ubalu Shnei Ze'evim Shnei Tinoikis Be'var Yarden, where Achman al-Son, there were two wolves that went, and they swallowed two children. This took place Be'var Yarden. And the story came to the Chachamim, V'tira as HaBasar. And they said the Basar is going to be Tahar. And the reason they said the basar is tar is because even though a child is mitama tumas meis, but once it went through the ze'ev, even though it was excreted, but once it went through the ze'ev, at that point it was considered nesakel. It's not considered basa tinoikas anymore, and it's for that reason v'tiaru as basa. They said it's not going to be metama Tumas Adam. But what do you see from here? You see from here that even though it's for sure not the derech to eat tinoikis, but afilu achi, it's considered an equal. That's why it was tiras abasa. So too the pill that eats the utzim, it should be considered gliglolim, it should be tar. So the Gemara says, l'chayr, from what Ula said, Rav Shimon ben Yotzadok, I think you have a little bit of a pshitas. Gemara says, no, right. Shani basa derachich. Basa is very soft, and because it's very soft, so therefore it's digested, as opposed to utzim, maybe not. But the Gemara says, there was a sefer to that story. They said that Samis is going to be Tameh. So what do you see? Because that Samis is not soft. So it's for that reason we say that it's not considered an equal. Okay, so let the Hutza not be considered the Mu'ukal. That's very hard. You can't bring a Raya. Basar is very soft. Atzamis are very hard. Hutzin is somewhere in between. As a result, good sushtel. But Lamaisa, it's not a Hachra. The bottom line is, says the Gemara, I don't know the answer. The Gemara doesn't say teku, but the Gemara is not machriya. Bayi Rab Zera. One more shayla. Chitin sheyardu ba'aven. Chitin, wheat that fell down from the heavens. Literally, a cloud dropped these chitin. Mao, what is the din? The Gemara says again, Lamai. What do you mean? What's the din? What's sugya, right? Be more specific. Ila Menachos. Do you mean, can you use the chitin now for a carbon mincha? The Gemara says, my lie. Why? It's chitin. Why should we be able to bring it for a carbon mincha? El l'shtei alechem. The shaylas, could you bring it for the shtei alechem? What's the chakira? Mi moish v'yseichem amar Rachmana. The Torah says, mi moish v'yseichem taviu lechem t'nufa shtaya. So it says you're supposed to bring it mi moish v'yseichem. No, la'fuka the chutz la'aretz the lie. That just means you can't bring it from chutz la'aretz. Avol the oven. But from the heavens? That's not chutz la'aretz. Shaperdami. Oiduma mi moish v'yseichem dafka. It has to be literally mi moish v'yseichem va'afilu the oven amiloi. And even if it comes from the clouds, it's also not going to be okay. Okay, this is a chakira. We want to know if mi moish v'yseichem satisfies oven or not. On the one hand, the clouds are not chutz la'aretz, but then again, it's also not Eretz Yisrael. So when the Torah says it's a kpeida of mimosh v'yseichem, la'afuke chutz la'aretz, is it also la'afuke the? What's the dogish of mimosh v'yseichem? Nish chutz la'aretz? The clouds are not chutz la'aretz. Or is the dogish? No, mimosh v'yseichem. The clouds is also not mimosh v'yseichem. But the Gemara interrupts the program for 1 minute. And the Gemara says, seriously? Umi ikoki gavna? Isn't there even such a shayla? Now, we almost felt like we could have said this a few times in today's daf. But this is the first time the Gemara says this. Umi ikoki gavna? Right? I mean, the pills, swallowing the kfif and mitzvahs. But this, I don't believe. There can't even be such a case. So the Gemara says, yes, we know of a real such story. Kid the Adi Taya. So there was an Arab merchant, his name was Adi, and he once had the following take place. Nechisale, where chitin fell down from the heavens. This is mamish man from heaven, where the chitin fell, literally, man from heaven fell. It was rum kizba. It was a tefach tall. That's how high it was. And it was chitin, and you want to know how long this pile was? It was betlasa parsi. It was 3 parsais. So he had this windfall, mamish, where all of a sudden these chitin came down, and you see something like this could happen. And because something like this could happen, it's a good ibaya. Again, the Gemara is not pushing the ibaya, but the Gemara also doesn't say teko. Either way, we're going to stop here. But just to do a quick sikum, the topic of the daf was the minchasayim and the shtei alechem. Minchasayim and the shtei alechem were both mater chadash. Minchasayim begvulin, the shtei alechem, and the minchasayim together in the Beis Hamikdash. And really, the latter part of the daf involved multiple ibayis, most of them from Rami Bar Chama. The first shaila is the shtei alechem matter only if it's brought kesidron? It has to be the carbon omer first and the shtei alechem second. What would be if you brought the shtei alechem first and the carbon omer second? What's the case? The case is talking about where you planted and you had ashrasha in Chodesh Iyar, right between the time that the carbon omer was brought and when the shtei alechem was brought. Do we say the shtei alechem works so that when you bring the next carbon omer, it's going to be okay or not? The Gemara tried being poshet from the Dover Ach Rabbi Akiva, not the easiest Gemara in Shas. The Gemara was doicha the dichoy. Regardless, that was the first shaila. The second shaila was with regards to the shtei alechem. In the event that there was hanotza or chanata of the Allen, do we say that would make the tefua part of the year of the shtei alechem would be matter or not? So you know that when it comes to the definition of what's considered chadash, usually it's totally in hashrasha. But the Gemara says it's sad that the chanota and the hanotza of the leaves is the equivalent thereof to the hashrasha. That was Rami Bar Chama's second shaila, and the Gemara sneteku. The third shaila of the Gemara was Rava Bar Rav Chanan shaila, and that is what would be if somebody went, he harvested chitin, and then he took the chitin, he put it in the ground, then the carbon was brought while the chitin was in the ground. Do we say that being that he already harvested it, it's considered regular chadash, and for sure the carbon is going to be mattered, or do we say that once it was put in the ground, that's as if it was part and parcel of the ground, as if you planted it again, and it's in the ground, and the Omer is not going to have the ability to be matter. And the Gemara said, by the way, this shaila is not only negeya, menachos, it's negeya, the laws of Oina, Perek Hazav, it's negeya, the sugyas of Shnai Moichsin, Ein Nishpan, Ala Karkais. But the bottom line is, do we treat it as if you planted it into the ground as something that's completely new, didn't have ashrasha in the previous year, the carbon won't be able to be matter it? It's in the ground. No, once you harvested it, even though you put it in the ground, the lashon of the Gemara is it's command manach bekadadami. It's as if it's in your pantry. It's as if it's in your pantry. It's in the ground. There's no reason we shouldn't view it as metal. There's no reason we shouldn't say that the carbon would have the ability to be matter. The fourth shaila was back to Rami Bar Chalma, and that was chitin shebegalalei bakar v'sa'orin shebegalalei behema. The Gemara said, what was the shaila? The shaila was somebody took the chitin and sa'orin, he replanted it, and now he wants to use it for menachos. So ordinarily you would say hakriveu nola fecha. But the Gemara says that there is an argument to be made that once you put it in the ground and you plant it again, so it's not so bad anymore. Or it could be it's still shvach. Once it goes through the digestive tract of the animal, it's abyssal shvach, and as a result, it's considered krishus, and based on that, you should never be able to use it for a mincha. The Gemara said, take on that. The next shaila was again Rami Bar Chama. If you're keeping score, this is the fifth shaila, the fourth Rami Bar Chama shaila, and that was the pill shabala kfifa mitzvahs, or the way the Gemara tweaked it. The case was talking about where he swallowed hutzin, and then it went through the digestive tract. Somebody went and he made a kfifa mitzvahs out of it. And the question is it makabel tumah or not makabel tumah? What's the chakira? Hutzin is makabel tumah, but kli glolim is not makabel tumah. Do we view it as hutzin, or do we view it as kli glolim? What's the yesod of the shaila? Golol is considered such because it was digested. Could be a pill can't digest the hutzin. The Gemara tried telling too. The Gemara ultimately didn't have any pshitus to this. The final shaila that we saw today, the sixth shaila, would be more shailas than tomorrow's daf, but the final shaila was Reb Zera shaila, and that was chitin that fell from heavens. Can I use it? Can I use it for the shtei alechem, or can I not use it for the shtei alechem? What's the chakira? The Torah says, mi moishvei seichem, for the shtei alechem. Moishvei seichem means literally mi moishvei seichem. Well, this is not literally mi moishvei seichem. Or does moishvei seichem mean, la'afuke, chutz la'aretz? This is also not... This is not chutz la'aretz. As a result, maybe it would be able to be used. This was the one time that the Gemara says, come on, is there even such a shaila? The Gemara says, yeah. But either way, the Gemara was not poached the shaila. So really, we're 0 for 6, right? We had 6 shailas, and all 6 of these shailas, 4 of them from Rabbi Bar Chama, 1 from Rava Bar Rav Chanan, the other one from Reb Zera, were unsuccessful. Maybe we'll have better luck in tomorrow's daf. We'll have to wait and see.